Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be looking at some different multi-class builds all involving the ranger. And I know a lot of people think that the ranger is a pretty weak base class compared to some of the others, especially like some of the other martial classes like paladins and fighters. But I think that that's only true as you start to get to higher and higher level. The base ranger at low levels is pretty good. Even the Beastmaster Ranger isn't terrible at low levels. The problem with the Beastmaster is that your pet just doesn't really scale and it just doesn't keep up, so you just feel like you're falling behind. And because so many of your abilities are about your pet, it just doesn't keep up compared to some of the other classes. However, I don't necessarily think that makes Rangers bad for multi-classing, because if you're only looking to take 5, 6, maybe 8 levels of Ranger, then you're really kind of getting the best of the Ranger class, and then you're combining with what other class you're looking at. So I've got 3 different builds we're going to look at today. One involving a fighter multiclass, one involving a cleric multiclass, and the best, the one we'll start with, in my opinion, is involving rogue. And I really like the idea of Gloom, Stalker, Ranger combined with the Assassin Rogue. And there's a lot of reasons for it actually. But if you look at the Gloom Stalker, at level 3 when you choose your archetype, you're going to get an extra attack in that first round of combat. And that extra attack also does an extra weapon die of damage. So that can be kind of a big deal. You've also got a fighting style, of course, common to all rangers. I'm going to recommend archery because this is going to be a ranged archer build. And you're going to have another ability which gives you a passive bonus to your initiative equal to your wisdom bonus. So if you have 14 wisdom, for example, which is probably adequate for what we're looking at, there's going to be an extra +2 to your initiative on top of your dex bonus. And if you take something like the alert feat, you could, with 20 dex and 14 wisdom and alert, have a +12 to your initiative every round. If you attack before your opponent goes in the combat as an assassin, then you're automatically going to have advantage on those attacks. Now, the other thing that Gloom Stalker brings to the mix is that if your opponent is relying on dark vision to see you, they can't see you. You're basically invisible. So as long as your party isn't using torches and screwing things up, in which case they're bad teammates, then you're essentially invisible to things that have to rely on dark sight to see you. So let's say you're fighting a bunch of drow elves and they're not using torches because, why would they? And your party are not using torches because none of you are human, it turned out, because that's just how things usually go. Despite my constant pushing the variant human, very few people seem to choose it. Then you're essentially invisible. And if you are invisible, you can attack with surprise, which means that as the assassin, those surprise attacks are going to be automatic crits. And if you're getting an extra attack in the first round, and that attack is already doing extra damage, then you're going to do a lot of damage. a lot of damage. At level 4, of course, as a ranger, you're going to get your ability score increased just like everybody else. At level 5, you're going to get extra attack. I do think you can go higher on ranger, but I don't think you have to. I really kind of like the idea of just 5 levels of ranger, get your extra attack, and then go rogue. And the nice thing about this build too is that it performs pretty well at any level range. Level 1 to 5, you're just a ranger, nothing wrong with that. Gloomstalker is pretty strong in those level ranges, so you're pretty good. You're set. At level 6, you start multi-classing rogue. Now you're going to get some sneak attack. You're going to get things like cunning action. You're going to get expertise as you start leveling up, and it just continues to add to the package. You're not needing an extra stat. Your rogue's going to be relying on dex. Your ranger is going to be relying on dex. They're all just using dex. You're going to be using a bow. I would recommend the Sharpshooter feat. This is one of the reasons you want 5 levels of ranger. I don't think Sharpshooter is very strong when you only have 1 attack around. But with the ranger making 2 attacks and the Gloomstalker making 3 in the first round of combat, you also have an extra 10 feet of movement in the first round, which could be very, very useful combined with things like cunning action, for example. So I think that this one really offers a lot. I'll just cover some of the other abilities in case you want to go higher, but I really don't think you have to. At level 7, you'll get Iron Mind. This is going to allow you to have proficiency on wisdom saves if you didn't already. Say, for example, let's say you started rogue and then went ranger later. You'll gain proficiency on wisdom saves. If you already have them, though, like if you started ranger, you can choose between charisma or int. Unfortunately, intelligence and charisma saves are nowhere near as common as wisdom saves, so I feel like it's an okay ability. If you started rogue, though, and then went ranger, it becomes a very strong ability, actually, because wisdom saves are abundant, and they're usually pretty devastating when you miss. You know, I mean, you're feared, you're hypnotized, you're mind controlled, you're whatever it ends up being. It's almost always bad when you fail a wisdom saving throw, though. At level 11, you get Stalker's Fury. If you miss with an attack, you can, as part of your attack action, you can make an extra attack that round. So you fire with your Gloom Stalker attack, and that one misses. You now have an extra attack, so you're still getting 3 attacks. Well, actually, now you're getting 4 attacks in that first round of combat. And if you're using Sharpshooter with the -5 penalty to hit, that could happen. So, like I say, it's not necessarily the worst thing to go to 11, but I feel like that's an extra 7 level. Yeah. Or it's an extra 6 levels. I can't do math. I suck. We'll leave that in there, though, so you can all mock me in the comment section. So, you know, that's a lot of extra levels of ranger is what I'm trying to say. And if you take, say, the 5 levels of ranger and 15 levels of rogue, you're going to have access to like that extra ASI at level 14 that rogues and fighters are the only ones who get one there. You're going to have a lot more high-level rogue abilities in general, and I think that's probably the way that I would prefer to go. But, like I said, it's possible to go either way. At 15, if you go that high, you'll get Shadowy Dodge. You can use your reaction to give somebody disadvantage to attack you, assuming they didn't have advantage anyways. Not a bad ability, but, you know, let's be honest, wouldn't you just rather have a whole bunch more extra sneak attack dice so you can, you know, crit with them from the shadows while hiding as a Gloom Stalker? Yeah, of course you would. That's why we took this combination. Let's not overlook the fact that you will have some decent spells too. I mean, you're only going to have like the level 1 spells if you only take 5 levels. Or no, you'll have level 2 spells as well. Sorry, my bad. I'm just making all kinds of mistakes in this video. So you'll have 1st and 2nd level spells. You'll have like Hunter's Mark, for example. Always nice to have. Pass Without Trace. Excellent spell. So you do have some pretty good ones there as well. And, you know, I don't think you really need a lot more levels of Ranger than 5. And like I said, it performs pretty well at every level range. If your campaign is going to 10 or 11, then you're going to have enough rogue levels that you're doing quite a bit of damage. You've still got your extra attacks. You know, it's performing pretty well. The next one I want to look at really quickly is the Ranger Cleric. And I would probably say that this is kind of a flexible build where you can go either like melee or ranged. One reason I might want to go ranged is if you take, say, a War Cleric, you could use a +10 to hit from your War Cleric to help you land those Sharpshooter attacks. And that, again, is very handy. It'll also give you heavy armor as a bonus proficiency, which is nice, but you're not going to be able to sneak very well, and it'll require some strength, so maybe keep that in mind. Another alternative, if you're set on wearing heavy armor, though, could be take a Life Cleric. If you're planning on doing a bunch of healing, it's not necessarily bad. You've got a lot of spell slots available from Cleric. Your Ranger ones are going to count as half levels, so you'll still have some spell slots. If you take your 5 levels of Ranger, it will mean you can't get 9th level Cleric spells, so be aware of that. But I don't know that 9th, like the high level Cleric spells like 7, 8, and 9, while strong, are nowhere near as strong as like the Wizard spells of those same level ranges. So it's not like you're not losing out on anything, it's still a sacrifice, it's just not as big as if you were a Wizard, for example. So keep in mind that you can be giving up a bit there. I kind of think of this one as more of a War Cleric with the Ranger as a base instead of, say, going with a Fighter. Fighter would have given us Action Surge, which is nice, but Ranger gives us a lot of the same benefits. It's going to give us a fighting style, it's going to give us a D10 hit points, it's going to give us an extra attack, and unlike the Fighter, it's going to give us a few other advantages like more spells of different classes, some additional spell slots that the fighter wouldn't have given a cleric, things along that line. Still a pretty decent build, I think, and it's a lot more flexible. I could see maybe taking something like a hunter, not necessarily a gloom stalker. I think any of the ranger subclasses would work fairly well with this. So you can choose one you really like and go with it. You don't have to go with war cleric or life cleric either. If you still want to be a sneaky dex guy and use a bow, this is completely viable. You could use something like trickery to set up illusions and distract people. You could go with, like nature or anything like that. If you're not planning on wearing, a lot of armor anyways, it probably doesn't matter so much. If you're just going to stick to light and use your dex mostly, then, even something like a light cleric could be a lot of fun. Give you some AoE potential, which is something the ranger just traditionally doesn't have a lot of. You have things like volley, but it doesn't scale particularly well. The damage is fairly low. And, adding something like fireball wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing you could ever do. So I think that there's a lot of options there. One thing I like about this particular build is that you really aren't limited to anything. You can take any of the ranger ones, you can take any of the cleric ones. The last one I want to talk about is going to be a ranger fighter multiclass. And I think that kind of like the last one we just talked about with the cleric, I think any of the fighters are viable. Obviously something like arcane archer immediately jumps to mind, and that is a very strong pick. But even the champion, if you just wanted the passive chance to double your crit chance, isn't a bad thing. Especially if you went with like a gloom stalker and you're getting that extra attack, you're doing extra damage already on that first attack, then critting on that and doubling that up is just going to go even further. So I think there's some potential there. Obviously the Battle Master has a lot of great abilities, things like precision strike to help you out if you're using a bow on that -5 from Sharpshooter, could help to overcome that a lot. And you've also got action surge. Never overlook action surge. You got a second fighting style. I would probably just take the +1 armor class, defensive or whatever it's called. And then, from the ranger I'll take Sharpshooter, from the fighter I'll take that. If you're going with 2-weapon fighting, I'd still probably take that. But you could take 2-weapon fighting from the fighter and archery from the ranger, and then you're kind of a lot more flexible where you can go either way. You're pretty good in range combat, but if you have things on top of you, you can always just switch to your swords and go with those. And again, you're pretty flexible and pretty decent. So I kind of like that as well. Even something like the Eldritch Knight could be decent, giving you a few more spell selections, getting shield, for example, and a few other ones that don't really rely on intelligence might not be bad. So there's some potential there. You could pick up something like a green flame blade or a booming blade if you were planning on being in melee a lot. So I think that there's, some good things to be said about that one as well. I would probably be looking to go with either the Arcane Archer or the Battle Master personally, but like I said, I think all of them have a lot to offer. It's also going to give you the option of wearing heavy armor, although I don't know that I would. I'm still going to be focusing on dex. That's one nice thing about fighters these days, is that you can multi-class in or out with 13 strength or dex. You don't require both. So if you're going dex with your ranger and you want dex with the fighter, that's perfectly fine. And then you could drop strength and use that as a dump stat if you want, who knows. So I think that one's pretty good as well. I want to talk about feats, because a lot of these feats are going to be common to all of them. This is why I didn't bother going through feats for each one of these different builds. In almost all of them, I'm going to want Sharpshooter. If I'm using a bow, that's going to be my go-to choice. And it doesn't even matter if I'm going Gloom Stalker and I want that extra attack in the first round, or if I'm going to say something like a hunter and I'm going to take Horde Breaker. And hopefully I've got lots of large groups and I've got extra targets within 5 feet of my original target. I'll get an extra attack on him. And you could easily be making 3 attacks every single round. So, as early as level 5, right? For your ranger class. And then you're just adding whatever your secondary class is, whether it was the rogue or the cleric or the fighter. And, the more attacks you have, the more opportunities you have to use Sharpshooter and just keep applying that +10 damage bonus over and over and over again. Now, like I said before, that can be hard to land though, which is one reason why you might want to consider elven accuracy if you took an elf as your race. This is especially good on that Gloom stalker rogue one that we mentioned, because if you're invisible to things that rely on dark sight, then you're just going to have advantage all the time. If you are acting earlier than your opponent in the initiative round, the assassin is going to allow you to attack with advantage. And because of the Gloom stalker's initiative bonuses, you're going to be doing that quite often probably. So instead of using 2 dice and choosing the best one, now you're just going to use 3 and choose the best one. You also get a point of dex or whatever it was you might want to add to your character as well from that feat. So if you started with like an odd number, like say you went wood elf and started with a 17, then level 4 you take elven accuracy or whatever. Now you've got 18. Maybe you went half elf and started with sharpshooter, and then now you're still going to be able to take it. Who knows? There's lots of ways you can do things, and oh no, it'd only be if you were very human. Darn it. All right, but either way, also viable. So the point is, I'm probably looking to take sharpshooter. If I can take elven accuracy, I'm going to want to take that, and I'm probably looking to take alert on, well, especially on the assassin one, but even on the other 2, alert remains a really, really strong feat. And one thing I like about range classes, if you act early initiative round, it's not like a barbarian where you're charging in and then the wizard's like, I was gonna fireball and now you're in the way. You're not having to worry about that. You just shoot some arrows and stuff. And if the wizard still wants to fireball them, he can do that. You're not screwing with the battle plan or anything like that. So I really like alert in that situation. I think if you're going with the cleric and you're going to be like the melee type, then you're probably going to want warcaster. But for a lot of the ranged ones, I don't think warcaster is really necessary at all. You're probably not going to be getting hit that often. And I think that's one of the places where this build is, or all these builds are really going to shine. You're just going to do a lot of range damage. You're going to have your archery fighting style. There's, like I said, either precision attack from the battle master, or maybe your +10 to your attack from the war cleric, or advantage from the assassin. There's lots of ways of overcoming that -5 penalty and just applying that +10 damage over and over again. And that's what we're really looking to do, getting a bunch of hits and just do a truckload of damage. So those are my thoughts on the class. As always, I look forward to seeing your opinions and reading your comments in the comment section. Feel free to like, subscribe, hit the bell, everything else. And all you YouTube warriors, I'll see you next time.